Okay guys, little weekend wrap up for the box office, and let me say, if I were the Disney company, I would be embarrassed. That's how I would be feeling right now, because you had a relatively unknown fifth installment of a horror franchise that essentially trounced you this weekend. You couldn't even muster half that. No, $26.5 million for your second weekend run, which means you were beat out by Insidious: The Red Door, which made $32.6 million in its opening weekend. You were also in competition with the fourth weekend of your terrible Pixar film, Elemental, which only made $9.6 million in its fourth weekend. Then, on its seventh weekend, you were competing with yourself again in The Little Mermaid at $3.5 million, which still hasn't crossed $300 million domestically, which I would say pretty deep disappointment. Worse yet, the interesting part of all of this is a couple of these are going to be headed to streaming soon, and it's rumored that The Flash may head to digital next week sometime. I guess we'll have to see. But there's more to talk about this weekend's box office and what's about to hit all of these films. Here we go. Okay, the elephant in the room here is, of course, going to be Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning Part 1. And let me tell you, I'm very excited to see this film. You will see a review of that film coming up on Tuesday evening, likely after I've seen it, possibly on Wednesday or whenever Grant can get around to editing it. Hey, Grant, can you edit that quickly, please? Cool. Anyway, despite the fact that Mission Impossible is absolutely going to blow all these other films out of the water and you might as well not even compete, we have to talk about something that really drove the weekend, and it was a little known film called Sound of Freedom. And I reviewed the film because I saw it last week and I was blown away. I can't say enough great things about it, and if you want to hear more about the film, check out my review, which will be right up there. All right. Now, Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny is likely now rumored to be at $350 million in production costs, and
$350 million worldwide there, Four Eyes.
I still don't believe it. I think it's even higher than that. And if you know anything about Lucasfilm, they always come along much, much later and update their production budgets. In fact, we now know that the first Disney sequel, Star Wars film, was over $500 million.
Half a billion dollars?
$532 million to be exact, but hey, who's counting? Well, let me tell you, Disney, you're shareholders. And if you look at what is going to happen progressively to the film Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, then you already know that after a $26.5 million weekend, they will be lucky to net $6 or $7 million next weekend. In fact, I would guess at this point that ain't happening. But I would imagine that Insidious will still go forward for a little while, earning, well more than it needs to be profitable, which is something that Disney hasn't done in a long time. The only thing that can be argued as profitable would be Guardians of the Galaxy 3, but I'm still not even convinced that that's the case because, again, more hints that that production budget was much higher than it's been reported as, at least so far. Now, this is actually putting at risk what I estimated the Indiana Jones film would end up with at the end of its theatrical run, considering that domestically it's going to have a very hard time getting to $200 million, and internationally it just isn't performing at all. What that tells me is that I should have undershot the $400 million target that I had originally put on this film. Because if you remember, I said somewhere between $400 and $450 million.
You've got to do better.
It might be between 300 and 350 million, but it's definitely, well, not definitely, but likely going to finish under $400 million, just on sheer bad word of mouth alone. But jump forward into the next few days of the box office because, well, we have something to look forward to. Like I said, Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning. And don't get me wrong, it is not a cheap film. This film likely costs way more than its original production budget. It had so many false starts, false stops, all kinds of things driven by actual production issues during the course of the COVID pandemic that it it had a budget that absolutely exploded. Can it make money? Well, if it crosses that $1 billion threshold, probably. Now, what does it need to really earn? Well, I would guess at this point, with all of the factors included, you need to put this well over $1 billion, probably $1.1 billion. At that point, it's a moneymaker. Will it make it? Sure. In fact, I have no reason to believe that this film won't cross that $1 billion threshold. I think it will perform right up there with Top Gun Maverick, which will put it right about $1.3 billion or a little higher. And I know a lot of people will argue with me, but I think Tom Cruise is the very last movie star.
You're my Tom Cruise.
So what do you have to look forward to in the weeks to come, aside from Mission Impossible? Well, you have some very disappointing choices coming to you via Disney, because you're going to get a remake of a film nobody wanted in the first place called Haunted Mansion. Now, that film is set for, I would say, failure right out of the gate, because have you heard of it? No. Has it really been advertised where you are? Probably not. Did you want another Haunted Mansion movie? No. Is it less appealing because Eddie Murphy isn't in it? I don't know.
I think you've answered your own question.
I wasn't interested in the first movie. I'm definitely not interested in this one. And I've seen this trailer a couple of times, and I can tell you nothing here is compelling. And then let's skip forward. We also have 2 more releases coming from some kind of a Disney brand. You have this really strange looking animated film called Wish, which I have no idea who it's made for. I don't think they know either, and I have a feeling that it's going to flop as well. And then we're gonna wrap up the year of superhero goodness with The Marvels. That's right, and that film will tank like nobody's business. Recently, there was a study done to find out the popularity of Captain Marvel, and if anything, her popularity has gone down, even lower than it was before. And we probably are going to do a video on that one later this week. We also have another video planned this week for the Blue Beetle. Why? Well, it's coming out too. And let me tell you, the cast and crew, the actor, the director, the people involved in this production have changed their tunes when it comes to the fans. And you've probably heard about that story where originally they didn't care what you think, and now, looking forward, they really do. You're starting to see some of these studios take some very desperate steps for themselves. For example, Indiana Jones, in this case Harrison Ford, stepped in front of the camera to say, hey, we made this film for you. Well, sure. Guess who did that better? Tom Cruise, because he conceived it, performed it well before you saw the film. You knew he was going to promote that film hard. Indiana Jones, I don't know. Was that promoted hard? No. Returning to the Blue Beetle, you've also seen a lot of press around the director coming out to say, hey, come and see our movie in various ways, and trying to walk back all of the things that he said that was very anti-fan. Because guess what? You need the fans. Just started to figure that out. Hey, welcome to the party, pals. You've already lost. Don't forget that Warner Brothers has one final superhero film coming up after Blue Beetle, which will likely, well, fail. It is also a giant potential failure in Aquaman 2. Why? Well, still got Amber Heard in there, but also I think the audience is just done. They're not just completely done with superhero films. They're completely done with the DC films. And I don't know if James Gunn is going to be able to reboot all of that enthusiasm in 2 years. But there could be at least 1 or 2 gems that show up later in the year as far as the cinema is concerned, and believe me, I will keep you apprised of those if they actually make their release dates. And let's take one final thought here and realize that the release calendar is likely going to change. Not just for films that could potentially be released at the end of the year, but for films that may not get released in the window that's been given. Disney's already famously come out and changed the calendar multiple times over the course of the last couple of years. They're set to do it one more time again, because as the strikes drag on, nobody's going to have any content, and the things that are in the can will have to get stretched out over time. So it's quite possible that windows and windowing could change dramatically at the cinemas. But anyway, that's all my thoughts on the box office for this last weekend, what we have to look forward to, and what's likely to occur in the long term. Hopefully, you got some value out of this, and if you did, give me that thumbs up down at the bottom. Be sure to use the comments section to comment your thoughts about a very failed indie project, a surprising Insidious film, and a huge potential for Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning, because I think that'll be the big winner of the summer and the year. And with that, be sure to take care of yourself, take care of others, wash your hands, of course, because it's good hygiene. And until next time,